Meeting, a work session. It is Tuesday, September 20th, 2022 at 2:32 p.m. Meetings of the municipal council are being held in hybrid fashion. That is, members of the public can continue to view council meetings on YouTube and Facebook, or they may attend in person in the council chambers here at the Provo City Center. I will remind participants to mute your microphone when not speaking to minimize the potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up, recorded, and broadcast for all to hear. I will state the names of those who are here present. We're joined on the dais here by council members Shipley, Whipple, McKay, Ellsworth, and Hoban, and myself, George Handley. And Bill Fillmore is excused for the time being. And we're joined by Chief Administrative Officer Wayne Parker on the stand, and our City Attorney Brian Jones, Executive Director Justin Harrison, and staff who are helping us with this meeting. I neglected to call on somebody to offer opening prayer, and I see my good friend Dixon in the back. Would you be willing to do that for us? And Bill Fillmore has arrived to the meeting. Thank you, Bill.
Our Heavenly Father, we're grateful to be gathered in this setting today of the Municipal Council as they deliberate in this work session to consider the items and concerns and issues for Provo City. We give thee thanks for the abundance that we enjoy and pray that as this body and employees and the administration, that we can help share that abundance with our residents, our businesses, and our visitors, that they too might enjoy what we have here in Provo, which is so special. We do thank thee for all that we have, and pray that as the council meets this day and this meeting and others, that the council members' minds might be enlightened, and that they might consider all those issues that impact our community and make the best decision, and be able to have a healthy dialogue and discussion about the items and see all sides, and be able to, again, arrive at a decision that would be the best for the most. And this we give thanks and pray in the name of my Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. All right. Although this is a public meeting, only presenters and those invited by the council may speak or ask questions unless otherwise invited by the chair. Please wait to speak until invited by the chair. We have quite a number of minutes that are requested that require our approval. It is proposed that we approve the minutes from June 21, July 12th, July 26th, August 2nd, August 23rd, and September 6th. Are there any objections or requested changes to these minutes? Seeing none, I declare the minutes approved by unanimous consent. I will also acknowledge that with gratitude to Elizabeth for the often thankless work she does in preparing those minutes, which are extraordinarily detailed and well done. So thank you, Elizabeth, that's a lot of work. There's a lot of pages. We'll begin with item number 1, an ordinance amending the zone map classification of approximately 14.4 acres of real property generally located at 5544 North River Run Drive from Research and Business Park to medium density residential in the Riverbottoms neighborhood. And and the second item, which is connected, is an ordinance amending the general plan designation from mixed use to commercial for property generally located at 5515 North Edgewood Drive, Riverwood Bottoms. And a third, which is an ordinance amending the general plan map designation from commercial to residential for property generally located at 5544 River Run Drive. Bill Pepperoni will be our presenter. Thanks, Bill, for being here.
Thank you. Elizabeth, if we could go to the Planning Commission PowerPoint presentation. So if you just go to the presentation, go to about the 4th slide. There, that The one you just passed would be great. That one right there is fine. Okay, good. Thank you, members of the council. These items went to the Planning Commission just last week. And in addition to these three applications, they also heard a fourth, which was for the concept plan approval for the residential zone change. So the applications are to change that change the 14.5 acres from business and research park to medium density residential. The same applicant or developer already owns medium density residential property on the other side of the river adjacent to University Avenue. They would like to essentially move that MDR zone to this property on the west side of the river and then rezone the multifamily piece along University Avenue for future office buildings. The Planning Commission did see the concept plan for the residential portion, but not the commercial area. That's why we're only changing the general plan designation for the commercial area right now. The residential area did include 198 townhome units. They exceed the open space requirement for the zone they're asking for. They exceed the parking requirement for the type of use they have and the number of bedrooms they've got. I'm intended to be pretty brief in these presentations or these items this afternoon, but this evening I'm going to need time to go into some detail because a lot of questions and concerns have been raised by neighboring property owners. So both myself and the applicant would like sufficient time this evening to explain this in sufficient detail to the residents that they'll kind of understand what's going on. On the area that's shown as mixed use on the map you see in front of you, that's the area that had the residential development approved back in 2014. That anticipated about the same number of residential units, almost 200, but that was intended to be stacked apartment type units, 4-story apartment buildings. And in that scenario, what they actually did is basically leave Edgewood Drive. You can see Edgewood Drive going through right by the M in mixed use. But they bowed the road to the east and then swung it back to the west to give them enough room on the west side of Edgewood to put a building and parking there, and then 2 other buildings and parking along University Avenue. I think the plan we're anticipating for office development on that piece does a better job protecting existing residents on Edgewood Drive, because the plan that got approved before is a pretty direct connection from 5600 North to where Edgewood has homes on it now. And it's wide enough and direct enough that I think there would have been some temptation to drive along that faster than what we would probably want. The plan we're anticipating on that piece terminates Edgewood Drive and continues it kind of serpentine through the drive aisles of the office space back up to 5600 North. I think that will do a lot to allow access through the property, but to slow down traffic and to make the connection more circuitous. So, but by the time people get to Edgewood Drive where the first house is, I think they would be driving much slower than what you would have under the old plan that we previously approved. There are a lot of concerns about parking and access. The residential project will connect River Run Drive up to 1550 East in Orem, and that does connect out to 800 North in Orem. Because that's not the greatest intersection in the world, there's going to be pressure to someday connect 5600 North, I believe, across the river into the development. We've asked the developer to preserve sufficient right-of-way through his project that can be done at some time in the future. We've already been in meetings with UDOT to talk about a light at 5600 North in University. We're going to spend a lot of money to put that light in. So when that happens, it won't make sense to have that light terminate at a pedestrian bridge 600 feet to the west. It's going to make a lot more sense for that to cross the river and go into River Run Drive. That's all the comments I have at this point. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Pepperoni?
So 2 general plan amendments and 1 zone change is what you're going to be deliberating on tonight.
Mr. Fillmore.
Yes, Mr. Pepperoni, Can you give us the larger vision of this project? I mean, the two parcels are connected.
Yes, they are, and that the property owner really wants to take the maker space, the innovative kind of space, innovation space that Provo has become known for, and kind of take that to the next level. That property is intended to have enough space there, office space there, that people won't necessarily have to leave Provo to increase the amount of office space they would like to have. That's a problem we've been facing for the last few years in Provo. They start their business here, it grows, it gets to a certain point where they need more office space, and they end up out in Pleasant Grove or Lehigh because we just don't have that available in Provo. This is intended to provide maker space for those types of innovative uses, but then also have enough space on site that they can be a decent sized company and not have to leave. The same developer doing that wants to be able to have housing available for people who may want to work in his development and take advantage of that makerspace. So the townhouse units there are intended to be held in ownership by the developer and rented out. There's been some concern about those townhouses getting overoccupied, and Provo certainly has some history of that happening here. We're a college town. While there's a downside in not selling those units, because we'd all like to see more owner occupancy in Provo, there's also an upside in that by having it owned by one entity and managed by one entity, we do not have the over occupancy problems in those types of developments as we do when every unit is sold to an individual and half of them end up being bought by investors who intend to do exactly that. So it's kind of a two-edged sword. There's some disadvantage to not having the owner occupancy, but there's actually also some advantages to it. Also, the maintenance tends to be much higher quality and more uniform when it's all owned by one entity, like this would be.
So it's the same owner for both parcels.
Yes.
Coordinated development.
Yes.
Principles behind the entity desire to remain anonymous. You can tell us.
It's Brian Smith, the former owner of Qualtrics. Yes.
My understanding was that this is more than just some residential options and some business options. It's cultivating high-tech community.
Yes, it is
Provo
again.
particularly.
Yes, it is again going after that. Qualtrics started as that same kind of innovative space I'm talking about, that same kind of startup that I'm referring to. That Novell is the same way. WordPerfect was the same way, but it happened out in Orem. Provo, Utah County has really become known for that. We're not doing a very good job keeping those businesses inside of Provo because of our limited land availability. Our city's mostly developed. So this is an opportunity to not only provide more space for those types of businesses, those types of ideas and cooperative relationships, but to provide enough space that you don't have to leave as soon as you have your 10th employee.
So this goal of incubating and retaining promising technology companies is one of the reasons why they're asking for particular height requirements, height maximums, university, right?
Yes, and we don't have an application on that, but we have had meetings with the developer on that. They have asked for higher buildings, taller buildings than what's been built in the Riverbottoms historically. Not necessarily more stories, but just taller buildings. But that would have to be a approval that the city council would have to approve.
The idea being to want to have sufficient space to accommodate these promising companies, right?
Right.
Because Provo is fairly limited on ground, it's the least desirable location property.
Yes.
Our only options at this point is up, not horizontal, right?
Yeah, we're getting to that point in Provo with having so little land left that to underdevelop property could really come back to bite us in the future. That's something we need to keep in mind or consider when we look at these types of things.
Well, I know this development has been percolating for some time. I'm glad to see it kind of come to the fore finally and become more concrete. From an economic development perspective, this is huge for the city in terms of its potential for jobs and good jobs. And tax revenue and everything else. And these properties are one of the areas where I hike around with my dog now and then. Right now they're not much more than dog patches. They're just vested parcels. And so chance to beautify this area as well.
Well, it's actually, I think Mr. Fillmore goes even beyond that, in that the lady who is doing the two buildings in the pink, she's redeveloping those, rebuilding those. She has had a terrible time with theft and vandalism because of people living along the river right in that area. The best thing we can do for this area is to get businesses and more housing down in there, activate the area, get eyes on the river. That's the best thing we can do in terms of clearing up that problem.
Are there any plans right now for the property immediately north of that lady's pink property?
That is in Orem, and she's talked to both us and Orem about several different ideas there. She's in a tough situation there in that it's very difficult to service that property with Orem utilities. Much easier to do that in Provo. And so far, Orem hasn't been very willing to let that leave Orem and come into Provo. But she's talked about both retail, both commercial and residential uses there.
Is the Orem, tell us where the Orem city boundary is here.
Whatever you see colored is in the city. Whatever you see in that sepia color, that's in Orem. So the blue, the yellow, the pink, that's all Provo.
Okay.
What's in the sepia is Orem.
I just wanted you to clarify for me, where are you anticipating a stoplight eventually? Is it on this so-called access road? Or is it coming down off Canyon Road to where it hits University?
This can't figure it out. Sorry. Right there at University Avenue and 5600 North. So that'll be the eventual tie-in with Canyon Road. Canyon Road would tee in there and create a.
Well, I thought originally, maybe I misunderstood you. So thanks for clarifying that.
Sure.
Other questions? Ed, Councilor Ellsworth.
Was it in this vicinity that I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, we approved an area for TIF or a parking garage adjacent to the river, adjacent to Qualtrics?
One was discussed. It wasn't my recollection that was approved.
I thought it was approved. Yeah,
You
it was
remember,
like
Keith? We did.
Yeah, we did approve that, but it's right on the Qualtrics campus itself, but they have not moved forward with that so far.
So that's just south of here.
South of this, it's not part of this.
Okay.
Thank you.
I had a question that maybe you might get into more detail tonight, but we received an email from a commercial owner neighbor, Ron Woolley.
Yes.
So I don't know if you've seen that email. Have you
Yes.
seen that? Okay. I would appreciate just any color on that email. He mentioned a park that's Ron Last Park.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what your response to that email is and how we can understand the discussion.
Mr. Woolley met with myself and some representatives of the Parks Department, Scott Henderson and Doug Robbins, this morning. He owns the white building on the very south of that map, right below where it says commercial. The white building just below the yellow. Ron Last Park, or what used to be Ron Last Park, is in the south end of that yellow area north of his building. Ron Last Park was sold several years ago and hasn't been in city ownership at all during that time. Mr. Woolley made us aware of the possibility of soil contamination on that site. I wasn't aware of that. I asked the city property manager and the Parks Department to check their records to see if there was anything in our records that showed possible soil contamination. None of us have anything in our records that would suggest that. But because the issue has been raised, the developer will be asked to do some core drilling so we can test the soil and make sure that there are no problems with it. The developers are going to be as anxious to understand that issue and get their arms around it as we are, because they certainly can't afford and don't want to build residential units on potentially dangerous or hazardous soil. So that will happen during the project plan phase. All of those types of questions will get answered during that. But that was one of his issues. Another issue was River Run Drive, whether that's big enough to support this type of traffic. Yes, it is. This was intended for office space use. The office space would certainly have created some traffic impact, just like the residential will. River Run Drive is a wide street. I don't think there's about 50 feet of asphalt out there. It's plenty big enough to handle whatever traffic this may put onto it. The public facilities school you see back there, that's the Heritage School for, it's kind of a youth group home type of facility. We would never let something like that get built today without a second access. That's way too many people and way too many employees back there to be on one access. This residential project will provide that second access by connecting River Run Drive to 1550 East, which connects to 800 North in Orem.
There was also some neighborhood concern about the amenity space, green space, and you noted somewhere in the report, it was noted that the proposal that we're looking at now has addressed those concerns. Do you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, so the MDR zone requires you to put 10% of your building floor area into open space and amenities, into recreational amenities. If you look on the concept plan, if you look at their space along the river, the green space along the river and the pool and clubhouse and those types of things they have planned, they exceed that 10% requirement. Again, that's unusual. We typically have developers complaining that that's too high, that they should be able to only provide 7 or 8%. They've never argued that and they've exceeded it. It's the same with the parking ratio. As you know, most of the residential projects that come before us for zone changes, most of them, not all of them, ask for a reduction in their parking requirement. This group has never asked for a reduction and they're in fact exceeding the parking requirement.
And I thought it was obvious from looking at the plan, but the riverfront is that these properties are facing the riverfront. Is that,
Yes.
Did I interpret that correctly?
Yes, if there's a row of townhomes that's perpendicular to the river, the unit that's closest to the river has to have a front door and windows on that side so you
Great.
can look into the river. But that's been a priority from day one. Of the concept plan you're looking at is probably the 6th plan the development group has come up with. And that has been an issue discussed from the very first meeting with them, is that addressing the river and making sure that that is upgraded in terms of how it's used and how it's finished. That's been a priority since day one.
Wonderful. Thank you. Questions? I guess we'll go into a deeper dive tonight. We thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Pepperoni. So that was those 3 items are scheduled for the meeting this evening. We'll be voting on those this evening. We'll go then to item number 4, which is a resolution adopting the Provo Moderate Income Housing Supply and Strategies Report. Brandon Larson, Hannah Salzel, and Melissa McNally will be our presenters.
So we brought this to you a couple weeks ago, and so we went through a little bit of discussion with you on that on this item before. Since we've talked to you, we fixed a couple of things that we found in the in this proposal that were a little off. There were some charts and then a couple of references, a couple of typos in there that we fixed. Kind of the most notable thing that we did in this since we've talked with you, we didn't have a number of ADUs identified in this report. We're supposed to identify the number of ADUs, and we had. It was kind of challenging to find that number. I went and talked to a staff member who had worked on this issue a while back and found that there actually was quite a good list of ADUs. It was a little outdated, so I was able to go in and identify the ADUs we had approved. Now if you go and look in the last few years, it's pretty easy to see which ADUs we have, but going back was a little challenging. So I took that list, added the recently approved ADUs, and found we have 440 ADUs that we've recognized. So I put that number in our report. Fixed there. I noticed there on page 9 there were some charts, pie charts that were supposed to describe existing housing inventory data by type. And I realized those numbers were off, and they actually related to a question that Councillor Ellsworth asked a few months ago in a report when our consultant came to talk about our survey for the general plan. That renter owner pie chart was flipped, and anyway, saying it must have came from the consultant because we had the same problem in this report, and so we went in there and fixed the data on this. There was a reference to the city ensuring that people wouldn't be impacted by, the interest rate increases that we've seen, and obviously the city can't. That's not something we can. Obviously, it's not totally in our control. So or very much in our control. So we went and changed that to make sure we don't say insure. So we use the word mitigate, and beyond that, it was just a few typos. And so I fixed that, sent it out to council, and sent that out to you for review. So I don't know what other feedback you may have for me, but this is kind of where we're at. And again, this just as a way, by way of reminder, this is our housing element that the state is requiring us to adopt by October 1st. There's some changes in the state code that require us to not only have a modern income housing report, but we're supposed to have certain things in that report. We're supposed to establish that we are doing certain things that are codified by the state. And so we've identified those things in the report, as I noted last time. And so, yeah, we're just here to see if you have any additional questions, any comments on any of the changes we've made, and yeah, so that's what we're here for.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions, feedback, and so just to underscore what you just said, the goal, of course, is we need to try to pass something by the end of this evening.
Right.
And I know you sent this out in plenty of time for us to give feedback. I confess, at least in my case, maybe I'm not alone. Maybe predictably, council members sometimes struggle to get to things through email that then we get to at the meeting. So hopefully if we give you some feedback, it's not going to create too many obstacles for you.
Sure.
Chair
Yeah.
Handley.
Councillor Ellsworth, go ahead.
So I've been in a number of meetings with cities and with legislators, and if we don't pass it tonight, it's not the end of the world. We can just submit a report to the state saying we'll submit this and adopt it and submit it in October, and there's really no significant consequences. So if we needed to postpone a couple of weeks, it's not earth shattering.
Yeah, there's we did receive an email from the state. I'm not sure what his title is, but he reminded us to get it in by the 1st. I know there's a 90-day period where, I know it seems more urgent to get it in by December 1st, but we also have a report that we're supposed to get into the state by October 1st, and it's kind of contingent upon this being adopted as well. So, but you're right. I'm sure there's some flexibility built in the process.
Councillor Whipple.
So I just had a quick question about some of the definitions in here,
Okay.
particularly how single family homes, multifamily homes, and ADUs work together. So if a single family home has an ADU, it's still considered a single family home in this report or not?
I am not 100% sure. Do you? It is considered, it sounds like it is considered a single family home.
Okay, and so our single family homes, we have 18,066
That's, yes.
and 440 ADUs that are currently legally.
Yeah,
registered.
they're recognized by the city, right? We assume there's many more.
So only 2.4% of our single family homes have a registered permitted ADU.
That's the numbers we came up with.
Okay. That's incredibly low.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back, so we recently changed the way that we permit those, and they've become increasingly easier to find in our permitting system. Prior to that, I think it was relatively easy for the last, maybe going back from, I think we changed our process in 2018, and then going back from there to 2011, I think it was fairly easy to find those, but going beyond that's really challenging to find them. So I think there's, there probably are others, but the process of trying to find them is really challenging. So
it would be easier if for the staff and administration, if ADUs were permitted more broadly so that they could be registered and counted, than just because we have this unknown number of likely underground ADUs.
right. Yeah, it certainly, it might, if they were, if the ADU provisions were broadened, it certainly would encourage people to come in and get their ADUs recognized by the city, knowing that they're not going to get turned away. But it might definitely help with that issue for sure.
And if we were able to count all of those, then that would help our numbers on moderate and affordable housing.
Yeah, I think you're right on there.
Okay, because it may be that our situation for moderate housing is not quite as bad as it looks because we are not able to count all of the units that really qualify for it.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Hoban.
Isn't it possible that we have low ADUs because of that high renter occupied number that is twice as high as the state or the county?
For sure.
So the question probably begs the question, we've got a lot of rental income elsewhere. So begs the question, do we really need the ADU in order to increase the rental that is already really high? So I'm not saying we shouldn't add ADUs, but what I'm saying is there's a reason that the city of Provo has been resistant to open up ADUs in more places. And it's because of where we do stand with the low income housing already and the rental income housing. I would assume.
Don't you think all those people who are renting could, not all those people, but a fraction of the people who are renting could then afford to purchase their first home if they were able to offset some of the costs with an ADU?
A small fraction, but most not, as they are students and likely to move out of Provo eventually. That's where most of that rental income comes from. Right?
So the idea would be
Is
to
a 4-year student going to come and buy a home and then rent it out?
stay here
Probably
after
not.
2 years, bought a home?
Right. 99% do not.
89%?
I would bet
Why don't we-
99%
Let's,
of BYU
let's just take
students would
one
not.
comment at a time instead of back and forth. That's okay.
I think I had the floor when she interrupted.
Yes.
Thank you. I would say that most students that come here, that's what's making up that rental income. Most of them aren't staying. So I think to think that we need to, really look at figuring out how to add more ADUs because we need more rental. I think I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I'm saying we definitely need to consider it. I think there's a fallacy that adding more ADUs is going to fix our housing problem. There's 10 years of pent up demand in Utah. Right. And so we could build for 10 years straight in Utah County and still not meet demand. We could build out every inch of this city and still not meet demand. So I think what the point I'm trying to get at is we can't be so black and white about how we look at these issues. We need to kind of look at it holistically and say, we've got a really low income in Provo, and that impacts our ability to drive retail to Provo, and it impacts a lot of things. So
Right.
in my mind, we have to look at these issues holistically. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. And I don't think that, ADUs aren't the only, the only thing that's going to fix this housing issue. There's a number of other things that can be done with we've talked a lot about missing middle housing and just things that we can do to our ordinance to kind of facilitate some of that. So yeah, ADU is just one of the important things that might help us on this housing affordability crisis that we're in.
Mr. Fillmore.
Thank you, Chair Hadley. Help me get my bearings on some of the parameters we're dealing with, Brandon. Initially, it was indicated we had to do this month, and then it's indicated that we a little more flexibility, push into October.
That's I would, as staff, I would encourage you to try to adopt something tonight. It's in the state code. It says you are to adopt a moderate income housing element with the state required pieces or state required content by October 1st.
Practical matter. No one's going to be lined up on the wall and shot if we push it into October, right?
No, I think there potentially will be repercussions, perhaps December 1st, I think, is when there's more challenges, impacts to potential grants and so forth.
Okay. I mean, the main reason I ask is this is a pretty major item. And I think it merits a little more public input if they really understand what's going on here, as opposed to us rushing it through tonight. Do we, one of the things we've talked about is a housing audit, and we're waiting on the state to do that. So is there any estimate when you folks think the state's going to finish its housing audit that we could make more quantifiable decisions based on?
The housing audit, as noted in the last work session, the state's working on that. I haven't heard of other than I believe they're hoping to get us information by next year, some type of database.
Well, the entire state is under the burden of satisfying this statute without the benefit of that audit.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, that's not good, but it's the law, right?
Right.
Okay, next question. If without the audit, I mean, how confident are we with respect to the number of 440 ADUs? Those are the ones that are licensed, right?
Correct.
Do we have any sense, even a reasonable guesstimate about, Bug referred to them as underground, I'd say illegal ADUs. I mean, how?
No idea at all. I assume they're widespread. Anecdotally, you hear about them quite a bit, but I don't have anything to really give you a good estimate on those.
I mean, nobody in your department willing to take a wild guess at how many people are illegally.
Anybody want to take a guess? I don't know of anybody in my department that is willing to take that one. More than 12.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a bugaboo, isn't it? I mean, we're just going in the dark here to some extent. And to some extent, this document, depending on how it's implemented, ends up being essentially amnesty, right? I mean, for many people who have illegal ADUs, are we going to grant them status that they could get an ADU, even though under the current law they couldn't?
This is a policy document, so all it's doing is establishing housing policy for the city, and any of the policies in here would have to be codified before they. So no, nobody's getting amnesty at all from this document.
Okay, so is there a numerical commitment that this takes us towards under the implementation section? Or is this just stating general policy, kind of what we'd like to see, as opposed to absolute numerical quotas or anything like that?
I'm not aware of any numerical quotas. It establishes policies for, for the different modern income housing issues that our city's facing. At the end of the at the end of the element, the housing element, it gives us an implementation table, and there we identify the strategies that we're going to take, but none of them are they're more high level policies. There's nothing really there that's we're not getting into fine details or getting into specific numbers in these. It's if you look at some of those, encourage more options for entry level housing, including smaller lots and mixed housing. This is high. These are high level policies that are supposed to inform us as we go to, make code changes to facilitate these some changes to help with our affordability issues. So.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear, under the current state statute that we're trying to comply with, doesn't set mandatory minimums or quotas or anything like that. Just that they want a policy in place, a statement of general principle.
Right, exactly. I mean, the language that you see here on the screen, a lot of this probably comes from the state code. And so I think this is a pretty good example of kind of some of the language you're seeing in the state code. And you can see that it's higher level ideas and it's not giving us quotas. We're not committing to quotas through this document. Yes.
So the goals in this plan are very broad level policies, you can see, and they're interviewed or identified on the far right column. You can see 1 of 24, or some cases it's 1 of 3 required by, and then the reference in the code that lists the menu we can select from. Provo's already doing several of them. Some of these goals are simply to continue doing what we're doing. There are no specific numeric quotas, but we are required to show some improvement as we continue to submit these reports. And the numbers in this first report become our benchmark to show improvement for the next.
That's very helpful, Hannah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So part of the statute is it requires annual reports.
It does. Yeah. And in fact, that's one of the things that I have to do by October 1st. The annual report this year is really easy. It's just basically showing that we are going through the process to adopt this. And then from then on, we have to, the process becomes much more rigorous. We have to show the number of attached and detached ADUs, and that's one example. I can't remember off the top of my head the others, but it is pretty challenging after that. It's codified in the state code at the end of 1098.
Okay.
Anyway, not that matters to you, but yeah, it's codified. So
that's fine. So, I mean, as I understand, we are in compliance with the ADU statute right now.
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
And so we comply with this particular state statute simply by sending reports, or are we going to be evaluated every year by some agency saying, hey, you're falling short of this or that expectation by the state?
We have to submit it to the state every year, and the report, that is, we have to submit the report, and they will evaluate our compliance with these state code requirements.
Okay, but the state code is general requirements, and then they're not quotas, you said. So is this report primarily for the benefit of the legislature to see if their hopes are being fulfilled?
Yeah.
Or is there a penalty involved if we don't hit some minimum here?
I think there's some funding issues that could come into play, access to grants and things that could be impacted.
If certain numerical levels aren't met.
That is
that's all. I'm just trying to avoid that.
Right. We were asked to, and you can see up on the screen if you go down 1 or 2 more, we were asked to make sure that we had, if you can go down the screen a page or 2. So keep going. Hannah was talking about pointing out the 1 of 24. The city was required to adopt 3 of these strategies. They're high-level strategies. And then there was a 4th that we were required to have because we had a fixed rail system, the front runner. And so that's what we were asked to do this go round. In the next year, there's a different code section that we have to address with the state code. And yes, it does get into numbers, but the state code required us to do this year to deal with those broad level or those high level issues. The one example that I've mentioned before that I know we're going to have to do, and that's going to probably be more of an administrative issue. I don't know how many attached and detached ADUs we have. That's going to be something that we're going to have to address through our permitting system. We may need to start notating that in the on a building permit, for example. So there are some administrative things that we may need to tool up to be able to answer some of these report questions. I don't have that section in front of me, so I'm having a hard time speaking to that, but I can pull it up and give you a little sampling of what some of those things are that they'll be looking for. It's, for instance, they're saying that
While you're pausing, I just want to make sure other council members have an opportunity to ask any preliminary questions before tonight. We're going to have more time tonight to discuss, but we've only got about 10 minutes left, so.
Provide sufficient information to assess the municipality's progress, and like Hannah said, implementing the modern income housing strategy. So we've got to show that we've made progress. We've got to show that we monitored compliance with that we've been monitoring our implementation plan. We've got to demonstrate that it talks about describing deficiencies in reports and actions needed to cure deficiencies. I'm not aware of anything that we're deficient in that report. I do know that moving forward, there will be a bigger burden that we'll have to bear, but I'm not aware of anything that's going to be more challenging to meet due to the reports that we have to meet next year. So,
Thank you, Brandon. So if we adopted this tonight, it does become part of our general plan.
it does.
So is it also subject to modification when we finalize the general plan, or is it fixed in stone?
You know, it'll be adopted and it'll be part of our general plan, but that doesn't mean we can't. I mean, at any time we can establish a process to amend it, and so if we find that there's some issue, we're still going through a general plan process and you can fix it there. So that's.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Ellsworth.
Yeah, so looking at this table or this matrix, these are policies that were pulled from other Provo documents, or these are the menu items that the state created in years ago? Or what's the origin of the first column?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sure.
I'm not going to go pull it up on screen, but this is introduced as the implementation matrix table for all of the housing goals in the draft general plan. So some of these are drafted, and this is your first crack at revising them. If you have concerns about goals that are in this table, as long as they're not required by the state, we can remove them. That can be part of a future discussion and doesn't need to slow down our passing this by this evening or by October 1st. If that helps remove any pressure at all, if there are concerns about the goals, we just have to meet the basic state minimum requirements for this report today. We can address other concerns later.
I think that's one of my concerns here, is that someone's couching this as a policy document, whereas what the state really wants is just a report, right? That's somehow integrated into our general plan.
A report with goals showing that we will be able to make demonstrable progress by next time we submit the report next year. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So it's not totally a policy document, but there's goals that we are quasi bound to, or I mean, if it was a policy document, then we would have more public participation. If it was a policy document, the council would be involved with the policy creation, but these are types of policies? What?
The document itself, the actual body of text is fairly summative. As you saw, it's mostly reporting on current numbers. There's not a lot of policy there. It is what it is. The policy comes from this small goal section.
Which
Okay. Which is not required, or no, it is required.
Portions are required. I'll go to the table and show which portions are required.
Okay.
Counselor, are you done? Sorry.
Yeah.
Counselor McKay.
Counselor Whipple made a question that had a comment that made me have a question. She mentioned that, the ADUs could reflect that why we have such poor moderate housing. My understanding was that as far as a city, we do have a high percentage of low income and moderate housing compared to the surrounding areas. Is that true?
That's my understanding
Yeah.
as well. We do quite a good job compared to the rest of the county on that.
And this, even compared to state numbers, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So we are like a leader in the state in low income and
low
medium income
yes,
housing.
we bear the lion's share of that in the
Yes.
county.
I mean, we definitely have a shortage of family homes and 4+ bedroom homes. And, we have housing issues, all of them have a housing issue right now, but there's definitely also a housing issue of the single family homes. And one of the things about, I guess my big hang up with ADUs in Provo, specific to Provo, is that we do have this huge shortage of single family homes. Like our percentage is what, 52, and that includes townhomes and all the other types of homes that were lumped into single family homes. And we're about 25% lower than the state on that one. And what I fear with the ADUs is seeing that, and I've had a number of residents call me and email me about this, that they can buy a bigger home that can be ADU'd because there's 4 bedrooms in the basement or something, or 3 bedrooms. And they will pay less in mortgage with their ADU rental income than they would in the home that would fit them, their size.
Right.
And what we're doing is we're just changing the inventory. We're making it basically a duplex for smaller families or individuals, as opposed to a family of 4+ kids. And we're just changing it. We're not increasing housing. We're not housing necessarily always more people, but we're changing what the housing is. And so it's just something that I definitely think about with that. And I think it's important to acknowledge that we are a leader in low income and moderate income housing in the state.
I had a couple of quick questions as we try to wind down here. One is, maybe this is as much a question as it is a comment, but I'm curious to know what your feelings are on this. I mean, when we look at that number, 60% rental, or we look at what we do for lower income housing in Provo, I find it all very misleading if we're forgetting that we have 30,000 students who live in this city. And there is no other city, as far as I know, in Utah that has that kind of a student population. And that has a major reason why we have this. So if you actually calculate those 30,000, and I don't know how to do this exactly, but if that's roughly a fourth of our population, if you were just to imagine Provo without that population, our single family housing percentages are actually much closer to the state average. So I think it's actually a little bit misleading to think that we're leading the state in providing lower and moderate income housing for people who are not students, because I'm not sure that's what's actually happening. And when I look at the table on page 15, and you look at the low estimate, mid estimate, and high estimate of population changes, I'm wondering why we think, I mean, is it possible that some of the lower income brackets the student population is always going to be in those brackets?
Right.
So the question really is whether or not there's going to be an increase in people who are not students who are in those same income categories. And I don't quite know how to measure that. Like, I don't know how we can anticipate what's going to happen 10 years from now, because that population is always going to be here and that population is always going to be in the lower brackets. So the real question is, what are the demographic projections going to be for that other 70% of the student of the city of Provo, and how their incomes are going to be changing over time? Anyway, I don't know that there's a quick answer to that, but that's a that's one thought in my mind, and I don't know, we're almost out of time, so I just want to ask, maybe you can comment on that later tonight as we get to it. My question is actually, second one is a practical question. If we don't pass this tonight, you guys have limited bandwidth as staff, and what worries me is if we ask you to do more work on this, which you've already done an extraordinary amount of, is this going to compromise our ability to get to the general plan and pass the doggone general plan sometime before the end of the next millennium?
Yeah,
Okay, that was
I
a
mean,
totally sarcastic and inappropriately so comment, but you get my point.
It's definitely gonna set us back a little bit. Is it gonna kill us? No, but I mean, we feel like the document's in good shape, and we feel like it's in shape to pass. We would like to use our time to work on the general plan because we've gotten really close on it. We need to tool up a couple of things on it. We had made a big push about 4 weeks ago to update it quite a bit, and have been pulled off on other things the last month. And so next week, Ken and I are going to get back on that, and we'd really like to use that time to do that, considering that we feel confident about this report.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? I'm looking at you, Mr. Shipley, if you have anything. Okay. We appreciate very much all three of you for all your hard work on this. And this has been a robust discussion. We'll have more discussion tonight. A closed session has been requested. If Mr. Jones wants to explain the premise for that.
Yes, thank you, Chair Handley. A closed session has been requested to discuss character and competence of an individual, which is one of the allowed reasons for a closed session. So it would be appropriate for it's time.
Okay, I will look for a motion.
So moved.
Counselor Ellsworth. Second from Counselor McKay. I'll call for a vote. Chair Handley will vote yes. Vice Chair McKay.
Yes.
Counselor Whipple.
Yes.
Counselor Ellsworth.
Yes.
Counselor Shipley.
Yes.
Counselor Hoban.
Yes.
Counselor Fillmore.
Yes.
The vote is unanimous. We will now, I forget the verb.
Close the meeting and
Close the
move into
meeting.
the other room.
Okay, and we will move to our closed session room, which has a name that's not closed session room.
The
but
pre-function area.
It's the pre-function area. Okay. Thank you.
Record.